Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB strategy show, I think. Dave Loughran with me, Matt Belman, Fantasy Tips Matt, running back-to-back shows today. No Josh Engelman on the NBA strategy show. So Greg and Matt did that. Greg suffered through an earthquake. So did I, as a matter of fact. I was recording a video, Matt, as the earthquake hit. My first thought was, all right, is your washing machine upstairs or downstairs?
Oh, unfortunately, it's in the basement.
All right, mine's upstairs, right? If it gets really unbalanced, the house can kind of start to shake. So I'm like, okay, it's the washing machine, or it's a huge like truck or an alien spacecraft landing in my front yard. In southeastern Pennsylvania, there's my reaction right there. Not very often that we get earthquakes. And I'm sitting down here recording a video. No clue what was going on, dude. 4.7, epicenter, northern Jersey, close to Greg. Yeah, first time in a long time that I've experienced anything like that. I was wildly confused and concerned.
I couldn't believe it when Greg was saying he thought it was an earthquake going on. I've done and experienced a lot of crazy shit in my life. I have never been through an earthquake. So by his reaction, I always thought earthquakes were like scary and like,
well, they are if they're bad.
Okay, so this was just like bad for you guys, but not a bad earthquake.
It wasn't even bad for me. It was what is going on. You know what I mean? It was more confusion because I didn't know what was happening. I mean, you're in like Japan, or you get one of those, or Taiwan that we just like. You just get that Taiwan earthquake from the other day. That's scary, but this is more just what's happened. I wish an earthquake hit National Stadium so I didn't have to play any Josiah Gray yesterday. That was what we would call a failed experiment.
Yeah, he was not very good. Neither was Pablo Lopez, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, Weathers was good up until, what did he end up giving up? Because last I looked, he had 6 strikeouts. Who are the 2 top pitchers on that slate?
Definitely Bybee. I was completely
Bybee crushed. Yeah, he crushed.
He had a ton of Ks.
Crushed.
And Lugo wasn't great, but he ended up with like 17 DraftKings points because he got the win. So I didn't check it to see it this morning. I had one Marlins lineup that, decently cashed, but wasn't ever going to win anything. So I didn't even bother checking the stuff.
I want to ask you guys a question. Answer in chat now, so we can, get on. Do you want to do strategy show for the main slate, 7 games, because we do have a deeper dive or live before lock coming up later, or do you want to focus on this 3-game live before lock? I'm open to anything here. I think it's an odd time for the show, given that lock for this upcoming slate is an hour away. I have no problem covering either of these, Matt.
Yeah, same. And I know your point. Like, I'm sure a lot of people are tuning in expecting it to be like the live before lock-ish because it is in that time slot. I'm good either way. I've looked at both slates, so whatever the chat wants, whatever you want, I'll roll with it.
All right. Let's see. 3-game early, 3-game main. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-2, 5-2 early, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think the people have spoken, Matt. I mean, the way I look at, the way I look at it is, the way I look at this right now is we're live before lock, or deeper dive live before lock. And that's 2 hours before lock. So that's coming up at what, like 5 o'clock? So less than 5 hours.
And that's not even like a big slate. Like, that's just a bigger slate than this one. I think it's a 6-game slate. So yeah, I'm cool with spending a lot of time on the early slate if that's what you want and the people want to do.
All right. Let's do it. And then live before lock coming up after this, as always, at 5 o'clock. So don't go anywhere. Let's get into this then, because you got 3 games. Tariq Skubal on the slate. And then, I mean, look, there's some good arms today. A couple. Bobby Miller, he was dominant against St. Louis to open up the season, Matt. 6 scoreless, 2 hit, 11 strikeout innings against St. Louis. And then Scooble, like there's some young arms on that Detroit team right now that we got to be paying attention to. He went 6 scoreless, granted, against the White Sox, 6 strikeouts. But once you get into these slates, like 3 games, 4 games yesterday, the question then becomes like, are some of these guys priced right? Are they underpriced? I mean, Scooble's over 10K on DraftKings. You've got Marcus Stroman against Toronto at 7,800 against his former squad. Not exactly an elite strikeout pitcher, but maybe the best ground ball pitcher in the league, an absolute innings eater. Could that trouble him a little bit against Toronto? We'll see. JP Sears, Kyle Hendricks, that's fun. And you say Kikuchi down there at the bottom. So let's dive into it, man. And let's talk about pitching at the top. Kick it off with Toronto and the New York Yankees. So Stroman and Kikuchi. This game, let me pull this up real quick. So highest, Jordan, remove that. Yeah, there you go. We're just going to take that overlay out. Total right now, 3.9 for the Blue Jays and 4.8 for the New York Yankees. So clearly on the Yankees side, this is an interesting spot to get to against the left-hander. How much interest do you have in either Kikuchi or more specifically these Yankee bats today?
Definitely the Yankee bats. Kikuchi, not really. I mean, it's a small slate, so every pitcher is quote unquote in play. But I like the 2 guys ahead of him a lot more. That said, Kikuchi is really, really cheap and actually coming in with a little bit of leverage in the tools. So I think it's a very boom busty type spot. He's too cheap for his strikeout upside, but it's not a good matchup. I mean, he gives up power. The Yankees have a ton of it. So I think the Yankees are the side you're looking at first. They're the #1 top stack in our tools, 3rd in ownership. So yeah, they're projected to get love, but the only teams not projected to get love are Oakland and the Cubs. And that makes sense because Scooble and Miller are by far the 2 best pitchers on the slate. So I like the Yankees here. Kikuchi is a fine starter, but kind of opposite of a Martin Perez. Like, he is a guy you want to target for DFS purposes. When he's really good, you're obviously not going to do much when you stack against him. But when he's bad, he gives up home runs. Whereas Perez is just like, okay, meh, the whole time. He's never great, but he's never really giving up a ton of power. So I think both sides of this game, I think you're either stacking the Yankees or playing some Kikuchi at low ownership.
Yeah, and look, there's people talking about Sears and Kikuchi in chat. All of that's understandable. I mean, think about this, and you kind of alluded to it. Kikuchi over the last couple of seasons, 26.5% strikeout rate. The guy can generate strikeouts. He's not a, ground ball pitcher. He will struggle if you're putting balls in play and a pitcher in a hitter-friendly park, but at the same time, right, like, Yankee Stadium probably a little bit more forgiving for left-handed pitchers. I think there's a lot of ways that things could go wrong for Kikuchi today. You and I would 100% agree on that. And, Yankees have a 4.8 total, close to 5. But you're talking about a guy, 13% swinging strike rate. Does this not feel, maybe this is exactly what you're saying. Does this not feel like a game that could go either direction? Like, the Yankees could light him up. Home runs have been an issue, right? Over 2 home runs per 9 in 100 innings in 2022 for Kikuchi. 1.5 home runs per 9 last year in 167 innings pitched. This season already, you had Kikuchi come out with 1 start, gave up 1 homer and 4 1/3 innings pitched against Tampa Bay. But on the other hand, there are strikeouts in this Yankees lineup. The only thing is, like, Yankees against lefties too, a bunch of those strikeouts a bunch of the heavy strikeout guys are going to have the platoon advantage today over Kikuchi on top of that.
So I think my biggest issue with Kikuchi himself is, first off, he's too cheap. He's not a $6,100 pitcher.
I agree. I was surprised that he was the cheapest pitcher on this slate.
So that puts him in play. The problem is, on this slate, it's actionable because you have got really expensive Dodgers. But I'm worried that everyone who uses Kikuchi is just going to be funneled into playing Dodgers. Whereas you just don't have options or pivots away from them. That said, he's too cheap and the Dodgers are very expensive. So that naturally fits.
Do you think I see what you're saying, right? Because you got Kikuchi at a discount, then it allows you to pay up for other stacks, and it wouldn't be the Yankees here. And Detroit bats against JP Sears.
Well, you just don't need Kikuchi's price tag then.
Exactly. But
I don't think
on a 3-game slate, though, is it worth differentiating there with only 6 teams on the slate?
It might be. And I'm kind of taking that question as whereas would you leave salary on the table and play Kikuchi over Stroman? And I would. I just wouldn't play Kikuchi over Miller, definitely not Skubal. So like I wouldn't leave the money on the table for those two guys, but any of the others, sure. I actually think you could make the easy case that he's the 3rd best starter on the slate from a fantasy perspective, regardless of price.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder if you're playing Kikuchi, does everyone just start running like 5-3 Dodger Detroit stacks?
Right. And I think there's a lot of leverage in what you're saying, like play Kikuchi because not because he's so cheap, but because he can beat everyone else on this slate, basically, and then use a really popular stack. Like, that's interesting. If I were multi-entering, I'd definitely be doing some of that.
Detroit right now, highest owned stack. Because you look at the value score in the top stack tool, also the best value team that we have on this slate. So I think you're going to see a lot of regardless of whether you play Kikuchi or not, I think everybody's going to be using Detroit as like, three stacks on top of maybe a 5 Dodger or a 5 Yankee, 4-4. I mean, maybe people are just loading up, going full out, like, primary stacks to Detroit as well. But on the other side of this, when it comes to Marcus Stroman facing his former team in the Blue Jays, and look, we all know Stroman's good. I think the price is reasonable. I think that's exactly where he should be. Maybe he's a little bit underpriced. He's not a particularly effective strikeout pitcher. Not even necessarily because he can't be, but it's just not the way he pitches, right? Like, they're talking about a 60% ground ball pitcher. You burn worms when you play Marcus Stroman. And going up against Toronto today, sure, at Yankee Stadium, Marcus Stroman profiles nicely there because he's going to keep everything on the ground. But what type of interest do you have in getting to him against Toronto?
Not a ton. I'm trying to decide if I like him more than like Spears. Hendricks is the worst pitcher or the least attractive pitcher from a DFS perspective on this slate. Stroman and Sears. I like the leverage that Sears is getting more than Stroman. Stroman is a good pitcher, as you mentioned, but he's just not a good DFS pitcher because he doesn't get strikeouts. This is not a good spot either. Like, I could see using Stroman if you're stacking the Yankees, so that would put Kikuchi out of play, and you don't have the money to get to Miller. Like, I could see why he'd be in play in that regard on this slate, but that's it. Like, I don't think he's a building block. I think he's definitely like a 3rd-tier option, even with only 6 starters.
Nick asked, and we'll jump around. If you guys have questions, throw them in chat. We got plenty of time. Nick asked, pay for Dodgers bats and get uncomfortable at one pitching spot, ? So I think that's kind of what Matt was saying earlier, is that it's definitely viable, but how many people getting uncomfortable at one cheap pitching spot are doing that so they can play Dodgers, right?
Yeah, I think mostly everyone. Like, everyone who's not using Kyle Hendricks as that cheap pitcher is going to do that.
I'm running the Sims now on this early slate just to see what type of what type of results we get. And Jordan, we can pull up the lineup generator as well. Curious, actually, stick with the Sims for this show. Stick with the Sims for this one and see what we come up with. I don't want to jump too far back and forth, but yeah, I guess Stroman can get there, but if Stroman gets there, it's because he's going like 7 one-run innings, and it's entirely possible. There's no doubt about it. I just don't like it. Would you rather pay that mid-range price point for Stroman Or would you rather just go down to a Kikuchi and take your chances there, or pay up for a Miller or Skubal?
It's definitely Kikuchi for me, unless I'm stacking the Yankees, where I could see you needing to get a little bit cheaper from Miller, and maybe you'd go with Stroman. That said, like, we'll get to these guys in the next games, but like, if I were playing 100 lineups today, I'd probably play Skubal on all of them. And I don't feel as good about Miller, but he's the clear second best pitcher on this slate. So there is a wide gap for me. I think playing Skubal and Miller together is clearly the optimal route, and to get a little bit cheap with bats. But yeah, like, I think that Kikuchi has emerged as my next favorite option.
I get it. And look, Bobby Miller in this spot, you have winds blowing in 10 to 15 miles per hour from left field, 40-degree temperatures. You can't really, particularly at Wrigley, you can't really think of better pitching weather than Miller's going to get today.
He was so good in his opening start, like, not playing him because of that, but he's a young guy that comes in with a ton of pedigree. Like, I'm interested to see how he fares here.
You know, it does make you wonder, though, if this is great pitching weather. I don't think.
Oh yeah, Dodgers bats. I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Granted, there's nothing at this point particularly redeeming about Kyle Hendricks. You know, got lit up, 2 home runs, 5 earned in his first start, couldn't get out of the 4th inning. But maybe that speaks to Dodgers bats as well. And I only say that because you look at the top stack probability, we have 22% Dodgers. They're the second highest owned team on this slate. And I mean, there's many ways that you could still get different on this one. The problem is, how do you do it? Detroit not really getting different. Yankees aren't that high owned. Toronto against Stroman sucks just because Marcus Stroman gives up so few home runs. I mean, dude, 0.59 home runs in 136 2/3 innings last year. That's 9 total home runs that Marcus Stroman gave up on the season. So, man, that is a really low mark. Do you feel comfortable stacking against Stroman? I don't love playing him, but I don't love stacking against him either. I don't know. I think the Dodgers might just be a necessary evil, and you just might have to lean on the fact that they're so good that it doesn't matter if the weather is working against them.
Same. So from a contrarian standpoint, I actually think the Yankees are the hardest team to stack on this slate. I know they're slightly less expensive than the Dodgers and Cubs even, but when you use the Dodgers and Cubs, you have the luxury of using Kikuchi. You don't have that if you stack the Yankees, and you cannot stack the Yankees, at least they're really good hitters, with Miller and Skubal. So I think that's the team that gets left out personally, because Kikuchi's the easy guy to get down to. You got to play Sears or really Hendricks, because Stroman's a little bit expensive too. The more I think about it, I know I just poo-pooed Hendricks and said he's the worst pitcher on the slate, but with the weather, he's still got a 20% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Like, I kind of like the idea of maybe flipping that Kikuchi and Skubal and stacking Dodgers, and going Skubal and Hendricks, or Miller and Hendricks, whatever, and stacking the Yankees.
Everything you're saying now just leads me back to thinking, all right, well, there's like a couple really distinctly obvious builds. And one of them, the reason that Detroit is going to be so popular.
Right.
Skubal, Miller, 4 or 5-man Detroit stack.
Easy, and it's the most optimal on paper, like by far. That is going to be the overwhelming build, like popular build, and it makes so much sense. That's why I don't love slates like this. When I love the chalk, and I think the chalk is just in such a good spot, those are slates I tend to back off. Doesn't mean it's going to work out like that, but I think that is easily the supreme build, but everyone thinks that.
All right, so then I'm going to ask you, JP Sears, last year, through 172 innings, made 32 starts. He struck out 22% of batters, so you're right around league average there. And guys, before you shout all of this down, mind you, we're talking about a 3-game slate. If we don't cover everything, then we're not doing you any favors. Like Sears had a real home run problem last year. There's no denying that, right? He ran into issues with walking batters as well. All of this is very evident. But this Detroit team still has some holes. Is there merit to going to a $6,500 Sears? Like, to me, again, we talked about it yesterday with Josiah Gray. Crash and burn, total disaster, did not work, right? And that's going to happen more often than not when you're playing guys that just aren't particularly good. But Josiah Gray had some strikeout upside. Pittsburgh was the highest, or one of the highest owned stacks. You take some shots. JP Sears, 22% strikeout rate. The Detroit Tigers have strikeouts, and they're 25% owned on a 3-game slate. What do we think about Sears?
I definitely like it a lot in like multi-entry type tournaments. And I'm going to take that, like the points that you've just made, even a step farther. So you just said like the logical build, and I agreed with you, was Skubal, Miller, and then stacking the Tigers. To take that even a step farther, if you play Skubal and Miller, the only 2 teams you can stack are the Tigers and Oakland. Everyone else is too expensive. So the lineups are going to be so funneled towards the 2 safe pitchers, and then Detroit, who's been pretty good, and they're in a good matchup. So anything you say to get off that, I'm going to think is good in tournaments, especially a direct leverage point like Sears.
Yeah, I mean, Bill said I want to like Sears. He was okay last year. Yeah, Sears had a few spots where he was serviceable. I mean, obviously he pitched in a pitcher-friendly park, still had issues with home runs. I don't think we can overlook any of that by any stretch, and his first start was heinous. I don't know, man. I'm just trying to look at this, like zoom out, 30,000-foot view. Look at everything. He's a fly ball pitcher. I mean, I like Detroit. Let's be completely honest here. I like Detroit bats a lot. The power potential against Sears, a guy that is prone to giving up home runs, had a sub 30% ground ball rate last year. None of that stuff works in his favor. What do you need from him today, though, for him to be viable? I don't think you need all that much, right? Like, for Sears to be viable, if he were to manage 6 innings of like 2-run ball and 6 strikeouts, that might be enough.
Yeah, I agree. And he's just viable today because the 2 best pitchers, like you literally cannot use another offense if you stack those 2, if you use those 2 pitchers. So the way to get different is going to be to use another pitcher, because if you use Skubal and Miller and you say you don't want to play Detroit, you're using like the bottom of Toronto's lineup, the bottom of the Dodgers lineup, like not good hitters, bottom of lineups, like nothing else mixed in. So everyone else is in play, all the other pitchers, knowing they come with risk. I like the idea of Sears. He came over to the A's from the Yankees. Might have been the Frankie Montas deal, but he was a well-regarded pitching prospect. He hasn't been great for Oakland, but I don't know. It's not even about Sears himself. It's about, like you said, looking at it from that 30,000-foot view and what wins MLB. And when you take a look at this slate tomorrow, no one's going to be surprised if Detroit, of all teams, didn't have a great game. Sears pitched well. And if that happens, you're just setting yourself up in a really nice position to win.
You're right. Chris Topher said Tigers are actually hot, though. Can't fade that for Sears. LOL. Yeah, I mean, look, they're 5-1, but if you go back, it's their pitching. It's Detroit's pitching. Their hitting hasn't been electric, No. Like two of their wins, they have 1 run in 2 of 6 games. They have 3 in another, I think, like 4 or 5 in one of them. They're not lighting up the scoreboard. This isn't some prolific, historically productive offense like Atlanta. Their pitching is what has been really, really good. Or the opposing hitting, you could say, has been really bad. But it's not like Detroit's offense has been stellar. I mean, the second game of that doubleheader yesterday, I mean, look, opening day, they won 1-0, right? They won 1-0. And that was the same game where Crochet had 6 1-run innings with 8 strikeouts. Yesterday, who pitched in the second of the doubleheader?
I know Matt Manning pitched. Did he pitch the second game? He was amazing, and he only got the start because of the doubleheader. He was really good.
Only 3 strikeouts, but 5 2/3 no-hit inning. Oh yeah, they had a no-hitter in the 6th inning. So
yeah, I mean, Detroit, they won that one. They won a couple extra inning games where like they didn't even score until like late in the game in the 10th inning. So
yeah,
their offense is.
They scored 3 in the 11th yesterday in that first game. Adrian Hauser went 5 1-run innings. These aren't exactly Cy Young candidates we're talking about here.
No, I'm not like scared to use a pitcher against Detroit. I'm scared to use Sears in any spot.
100%. I like Detroit.
That's all it is.
I like Detroit. All I'm saying is if you look at it from both angles, if Detroit ended up not having a good game, there's not a single part of me that would be surprised. You know what I mean? Like,
first off, it's baseball. Second of all, it's Detroit. Go ahead.
Right. No. Yeah. They have an 18% top stack probability, right? So what does that mean? That means 82% of the time they're not the top stack.
Yeah. I mean, especially slates like this, there's a lot of merit in just like doing whatever the field's not doing. Because you have concentrated ownership. And like, if Sears pitches well today, like on a main slate, I wouldn't want Sears at all. I would just fade Detroit because Sears is unlikely to put up a score that's going to beat a lot of pitchers, but you don't need that today. Like if Detroit isn't good, more than likely Sears is viable to optimal today.
Yeah. And look, don't come for our necks when JP Sears gets rocked. It's, likely to happen or very possible. But, if you're covering all your bases on a site like this and Sears getting what's Sears ownership at right now? He's the 5th highest of 6 pitchers going today. The only guy we're getting less ownership than Sears is Kyle Hendricks.
I see Hendricks getting more than Sears right now.
Oh, maybe I have to update. Hold on.
Or maybe I have to update. That might be my bad.
If I refresh it might, let's see. I'm seeing Sears at, no. I'm sorry. You're right.
Oh.
Well, they're both at 17%.
No, yeah. I think we both needed to update after all that.
They're both at 17%. Tarek Skubal's at 59% ownership, projected ownership in the stochastic ownership tool. Well, I'm looking at the top pitchers tool. By the way, yeah, if you have a subscription and you're using the tools, use the top stacks and the top pitchers tool. If you didn't know about them, they're super, super valuable. You're a hand builder, but I know you've been using those tools for a very long time.
Best tools in the industry, like bar none.
So Skubal 59% negative leverage, but still top. We have him with a 52% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So he's a phenomenal spot here against Oakland. Hands down, best pitcher on the slate. I would kind of put him neck and neck with Bobby Miller only because Bobby Miller is getting phenomenal pitching weather in a spot like this. 40 degrees, winds blowing in at Wrigley. So 42% ownership there, no real leverage either direction. Stroman getting 37% ownership, Kikuchi 26%, and Sears and Hendricks at 17%. So, it's, I don't know. I guess the contrarian side of me, understanding how baseball works and how often going chalky doesn't work, and on a 2-pitcher site, it makes a little bit of sense. Like if you're playing Skubal and Bobby Miller, what are your lineups going to look like? Playing both of them on DraftKings.
You can only play Detroit. That's why I don't like this slate. And I'm with you on Skubal versus Miller. Like I'm a huge Skubal guy. I think he's clearly the safer option here, but I think Miller probably, or not probably, but they might have similar upside because of the weather. Miller's strikeout upside looks elite right now. So I like both of them a lot. If you're playing them together, you're either playing one-offs throughout, like, and not even good one-offs, but just like one-offs, or you're stacking Detroit. You could stack Oakland, but I don't know why you'd use Skubal and stack Oakland, or the bottom of like Toronto, the bottom of the Yankees lineup, the bottom of the Dodgers lineup. Like Sure, but that's why it just makes too much sense to play Detroit.
Rand said you can get awesome bats with Sears. Yeah. I mean, Tamakis said, worried about, here's a question. Are you worried about using Scooble and Sears together? Both can't get the win. No, because if Sears were to have a good game and like, if Sears were to have a good game and just give you like 6 1-run innings, maybe 5 strikeouts or something, I think regardless, you'd be pretty happy with that result.
There's that. I like playing 2 pitchers from the same game. I think there's merit in a pitcher's duel, quote unquote, even if it's not like 2 great pitchers. And then also predicting wins is a fool's errand. So I'm never
100%.
playing pitchers for the win.
100%. Yeah, guy can give up no runs and leave after the 6th inning in a 0-0 game. So
yeah, it's very unpredictable.
Absolutely. All right, Matt, let's do something for a second. I got 150 lineups favored on the Sims tool. Now, keep in mind, guys, this doesn't mean you got to play 150 or 50 or even 20 for that matter, but just to get an idea of what oh, look at this. This is the first Sims run I've done. You're going to hate this, fellas. Bobby Miller, 45% exposure. Second highest exposed pitcher, JP Sears, 45%.
Hey,
Getting significant leverage on that. Am I surprised by this? Maybe a little bit because he's getting that ownership, or because he's not particularly good. But seeing Detroit's ownership, I'm not shocked. Guess who my third highest pitcher is, Matt? At 36%.
Gucci.
Kikuchi. Yep. Yep. Currently underweight on Scooble. Not because he isn't good, but I think so the way the Sims tool works is, the contest generator generates the contest, what should be representative of the field. So if you're in like a 15 or 10,000 field, 10,000 entries, it's trying to build something as close as it can to what that's going to look like, to what the lineups are actually going to look like in that contest. And then you go to the contest simulator, the pre-contest simulator, you simulate it based on percentage payout to first and all of that. And then it tens of thousands of times is simulating that contest, right? And each time it's simulating it, it's saying, all right, well, this lineup finished at the top, this lineup finished here. These were the players that were in the top lineup. So you see the simulated player ROI, the simulated lineup ROI, and then it's giving you those that would have been the most profitable over those tens of thousands of Sims runs. And in a situation like this, Matt, there's no doubt in my mind that after these tens of thousands of Sims have been run, these tools are saying the best way to get leverage, not like the most winningest, but best way to give yourself a chance of, winning on a 3-game slate and winning with what we have is not going to the Miller and Scooble lineups heavily together. And a lot of that is going to come down to getting a cheaper pitcher in these lineups. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of. That's what you and I, for the last 35 minutes, have been talking about.
Yeah, it just seems like from a MLB DFS perspective, it makes too much sense to not do that when, I just feel like it's one of those things. Good luck winning a tournament today using Scooble, Miller, and stacking Detroit.
And if you do, you might actually see significant chops.
You might. You never in baseball.
I know.
If it's that, you might. Like if both Scooble and Miller pitch really well and Detroit is the only stack that does anything, you will actually. You probably will.
Yeah. Because what are people going to do? They're going to go Miller and they're going to go Scooble. They're going to load up on, the better bats from Detroit and then fill it in with whatever's there. I agree. This is not something where you see a lot of chops at all. But yeah, what a way to kind of get different from the field in a spot like this. By the way, if you guys ever wanted to, the Sims tool, lineup generator as well, all that stuff, link in the description and in chat. If you want to do a week or a month, no matter how you play it, you're getting all of the tools, contest generator, the Sims, post-contest simulator, everything. Late swap tool, which for baseball isn't as important, but still super effective because it sims all of those lineups out. If you get late lineups and stuff for the 10 PMs, you're getting the top stacks tool, top pitchers tool, ownership, player projections, premium Discord, literally everything that we have on the site. If you ever wanted to check it out, it's well worth your time. And we've already had with guys, you know, our own guys and subs using the tools, $50,000, $20,000 wins, and we're 1 week into the season. So it's been really great to see that. But also people use this for smaller contests too. The four-seamer, the mini max, and they've dominated because a lot of people in those contests aren't using these type of tools. So the type of advantage you're getting in a situation like that is significant, even if it's just a lineup generator and you wanted to get in at a lesser cost. So if you ever have questions, hit me up. DMs are open, and always check out Greg's tutorial videos on the Sims. It's so easy to use. The learning curve is negligible, and you will love it. You will love it. But yeah, man, just looking at it now, look at some of these lineups. The top Sim lineups: Stroman, Sears, Miller, Sears, Stroman, Sears, Miller, Sears, Stroman, Hendricks, Stroman, Sears, Stroman, Sears. So a lot of Stroman, but Miller, Hendricks. It's a lot of Miller plus JP Sears.
Yeah, getting away from Scooble probably more than I would like, but I mean, again, it's an MLB slate. Like, we haven't even talked about this, but I wanted to ask your opinion on this. What's your take on stacking Oakland here?
Oh, probably not getting there.
Or the Cubs for that matter. I think they're both comparable because the Cubs are much better than Oakland. They're also very expensive though. But I think there's a place for both of them on this slate. I don't think you disagree with that.
No, not at all. I guess the issue that I have more so with Oakland is, do we have enough power in this lineup to overcome how bad of a team it is? They have a 3-run implied total today. Is there enough power here to say, you know what? If things start to click, which would be pretty surprising, like if things start to click, does this team have enough gas in the tank to get us there as far as homers go? They had since the start of last season, 88 WRC plus against right-handed pitching, 146 isolated slugging. It's bottom 5 in baseball.
I'm going to say no, they don't, but also yes, and that it's baseball, and there will be games this year where Oakland hits a few home runs. I mean,
sure,
that's
sure.
what happens. I will say this, though. I'm not interested in stacking Oakland here for 2 reasons. One, they are getting some ownership, so it's not like they're coming in completely unknown. Second, if this were like a crappy pitcher facing Oakland that was getting love, which they would be, anyone against Oakland gets love, I'd be very interested in it because all you need is that one day. Here, like it's Scooble. Like, he is a legit ace in my eyes. So I just struggle to see, like, there are worlds where Scooble sucks here and Oakland gets him, but those worlds are few and far between in my eyes.
Well, you're not crazy because in this Sims run, there is some Oakland exposure here, mostly 3-man Oakland.
When you get to these such small slates, everything becomes viable because, again, like, you don't play for this stuff, but like all of a sudden, if like Scooble gets ejected or whatever it is, then like you're almost like, you know, if you don't play Scooble in that case, like you are not guaranteed to make money, but there's so much leverage in getting off guys that are going to be this high owned. Not how I play it. And I don't even want to put an ejection or anything like that out in the ether, but you get my point. Just weird stuff happens a lot. And that's the merit for getting away from Scooble and maybe using some Oakland. Certainly not something that I would do in limited lineups, but in multi-entry, I don't hate it.
Would you rather go to Oakland or these Cubs against, I think we agree Bobby Miller's good and probably only going to get better, right? He's
for
the
sure.
type of guy, to me, that's only going to improve, you would assume, is only going to improve over time. It's Chicago's got some pop. We've seen it. We've seen Chicago stacks already take down tournaments this year. But what a tough spot with the weather, the cold, the wind blowing in at a park that's heavily affected by wind blowing in either direction. Pretty tough.
Very tough. I will say it's almost the opposite. Like, they don't have the same problem as the Yankees. because if you're using the Cubs while they are expensive, you're not using Miller. So that opens up like a Kikuchi for you to use to stack the Cubs. It's very eye-opening to me that they have a lower top stack percentage than Oakland. Now, they're basically the same, but even if they're the same, they have the same top stack percentage as Oakland. So I like the Cubs more than Oakland just because on the days the Cubs go off here, they're hitting home runs, whereas Oakland still probably isn't. So I don't hate the Cubs, but the tools tell me that they're a bad play here.
Yep. And Bug Boy, correct. I misspoke. Oakland was bottom 5 since the start of last season in ISO and WRC plus against left-handed pitching at 88 and 146 ISO. So said right hand, meant left hand. Doesn't matter. Terrible. God, I so badly just like the obvious approach is being like, hey, okay, we know what we can do here. You play Detroit, you play Miller, you play Skubal, and then you stack if you can get anybody from the Dodgers or from the Yankees. If I'm going to a cheap pitcher like Sears, maybe Kikuchi, that's scary as hell, but let's say Sears, I'm looking to get to some Yankee bats here because Kikuchi has that potential to give up a lot of power. I believe I read that the wind is blowing out at Yankee Stadium. Blowing out the center at 15 to 20 miles per hour. Pretty cold there, but Yankee bats have a ton of potential here. The question then becomes like, what are the best ways to get different? So we're going Bobby Miller, we're going JP Sears. Let's just say this for a second, right? Now I'm going to build out a lineup right here. So we're going Bobby Miller, we're going Sears. That allows us $4,200 per player remaining. You start looking at these Yankee bats and, Soto 6,300, lefty, not sure it really matters. Judge 61, stand and cleanup is 4,800. There are a few spots here. Like Volpe is $4,000 batting 6th. So there's going to be ways to get like Torres is 4,600. Rizzo in the 5 hole is 4,200. It's very doable to get a full out Yankee stack here.
Yeah, if you don't use the too expensive pitchers.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I said if you were throwing like Miller and Sears in there.
Yeah, it's doable. You're still like, if you go, so you said Miller and Sears, and then like, let's say you went 1, 2, 3. If you go 1 through 5 on the Yankees, you're still like, you're struggling at that point. I don't even know if you can play that because you have 2,600 left per player. This is why I think the Yankees are going to be low owned as a stack. The bottom of their lineup is much easier to get to. I like the Yankees a lot as my favorite tournament stack on the board also. Both sides of this game. And I don't want to stack against Stroman, but it's kind of like the pitchers we've talked about. Like Toronto could hit 2 home runs today and be the top stack on the slate because no one else does anything. It's one of those type days.
Do you have any interest in going away from heavy stacking and like have more of a balanced approach to the lineup, especially as someone like yourself that will often play 1-3 lineups across some higher stake stuff?
Thinking about your question of like how to get different. And I think that's a way to do it on this slate. Because if you use Miller and you use Skubal, you're just funneled into Detroit. There's really nowhere else you can go. So maybe instead of 4 or 5 men stacking Detroit, use a couple Detroit bats or use different Detroit bats in the field's getting to. Use a couple Yankees, use a couple Dodgers. Could easily see this being a slate where no full stack goes off. And you do, the optimal lineup on most slates is going to be one-offs. It's just impossible to pick them out. On days like today, if you don't have any stack go off, I don't think it's crazy to try to play that way.
How would you play it? You have any specifics there? Because this is a tough question to ask you on the spot, but like any specific spots you'd be looking at here?
I think if you're doing it like that, I think that No, but I there are no like specific spots, but there are pieces from the Yankees I like, pieces from the Dodgers, of course. They're all as a whole really expensive, but like you mentioned, Stanton profiles very well against Kikuchi. He's not crazy expensive at 4,800. Volpe is pretty cheap at 4K. So all of a sudden you've got like a two-man Yankees stack. Then maybe you look at Detroit a little bit and you go, everyone's getting love for Detroit, but you could be very confident that like Riley Green, who's getting ownership, isn't going to get pitch hit for because he's a lefty. So he's going to be in the lineup for good. I like that. You're going to need some cheap bats. It's just what it is. The slate is just ugly in the regard that the two top pitching options stand out so far and above the others. And then the best offense or the cheapest offense, the top value offense just looks so good. It's weird though, to me, Detroit is 4th in top stack percentage, and they're by far first in ownership.
Yeah.
So there is a ton of merit in just doing anything different to get off the Detroit stack. I don't have like, I'm going to do this instead of this. Anything is viable.
It is. At this point, all of these spots are going to be viable. And to your earlier point, maybe it is viable to say, all right, I'm going to go Miller, Sears with a Yankee stack and 3 Oakland bats. I know it's gross, but just, thinking through the process here, if you have, 8 righties in the lineup for Oakland.
The other thing about Oakland that's viable with, even if you use Skubal, like that's a really easy way to get different, actually. Let's say you use Skubal and Miller. You don't want to stack Oakland, but Tyler Nevins, 2,100. Like all of a sudden, if he hits a solo home run, like again, we're not using Skubal or Miller because they're going to throw complete game shutouts. They're just going to presumably strike out a bunch of guys and limit the runs that those teams score. They're still probably going to score. So you could pick out like do a two-man Oakland stack, Nevin and Toro. You don't need 4 home runs between them today. If they get on base 3 times combined, that might be viable at those price tags. You're spending 4,800 on those two combined with Skubal. You're using Skubal for the strikeout upside. You have a lot more room elsewhere. And even if you're using chalk elsewhere, those 2 Oakland guys are different. I think that's really viable today.
It is. Just to point out though, my God, is Skubal good at preventing home runs?
I love Skubal. And I don't think you're using them to hit home runs per se. Maybe you're using them just to, like, if Nevin at 2,100 gets on base, he might be viable.
Do you know how many home runs he has allowed over his last 200 innings pitched?
I don't, but clearly it's not many, but I'm not even going to guess.
I'll take a guess.
For his last 200 innings, 3.
No, that would be insane. But 12.
Okay.
That's nothing. That's
tiny.
That's his last 36 starts. He's allowed 12 home runs. I mean, that's, this isn't the way you should do this math, but that's 1 home run every 3 starts.
That's crazy in today's game.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Going back 2023, 2022, really good at limiting power. Ground ball rate sitting 52% last year. Very little hard contact. 2.56 xFIP. I mean, this guy's just really good. Really good. But it's a 3-game slate. So, all right, here's a fun one for you. Would you rather stack, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, chat. Like, where are you at on something like this if you're trying to get a little bit different? Would you rather stack Oakland against Skubal or the Cubs against Bobby Miller?
Is
it just Oakland because they're dirt cheap?
Maybe, but you could also say the Cubs are actually good. I mean, the Cubs for the past 3 games, and I know it was against Rockies pitching, were chalk. Oakland is never, ever, ever going to be chalk unless they're in cores, facing Rockies pitching. That's the only time. The Cubs lineup has power. That said, it is the A's for me because of our tools. Like, I think the Cubs are a much better play, but they're not. They're slightly behind Oakland in top stack percentage, getting slightly more ownership. If I had to choose, it would be Oakland. Although I don't know, and again, I've said this earlier, how much the value matters if you play the Cubs, because at that point, you're no longer playing Bobby Miller. When you have slates like this, everything just, correlates so much. So I'm not sure.
We had a question, or actually, Arkadelza said, I try to focus on Vegas totals over weather. That is exactly what you should be doing. 100% that's what you should be doing, because the weather is baked into all of those totals. So if you have wind out at Wrigley to right field at 25 miles per hour, say, and you're like, oh man, that's great hitting weather. Yeah, it is, but it's baked into the total. Like, all of that's baked into the total. All of it. So yeah, that, like, if you look at all of our tools and projections and the sims and everything, you're going to lean heavily on Vegas totals as well. That's where a lot of the stuff is derived from, right? So yeah, if you're looking at weather, the only difference though is, like, there's a big difference between, Matt, rain and wind, because with wind, that's totally baked into the total. With rain, and a game gets postponed, but it could have been delayed, the total, who knows if it's going to change much on something like that. So yeah, use Vegas for the total, for the wind and stuff like that. And it's no surprise that right now you're seeing the Cubs with a 3.3 run implied total. And the Dodgers would undoubtedly be higher than 4.4 if this was a summer game with even no wind blowing in or out at Wrigley Field. Against Kyle Hendricks, they might be close. They might be at 5.
Easily. I mean, this is about as low of a team total as you'll get for the Dodgers against Kyle Hendricks ever. I think that kind of shows you how good the weather is for pitching, that they only have a 4.6 run total.
Any other thoughts here before we depart for the day? Main slate starts earlier today, 6:40. So be aware of that. 5 o'clock deeper dive live before lock. Call it what you will. Coming up before NBA live before lock. Then the playback show after that. So come hang out. But any other particularly interesting spots to you that I think we've covered a lot, man. I'm proud to say I think we've touched on essentially everything, maybe twice.
Yeah, same. I will say, just to your point about the Dodgers, like, if the wind was blowing out here and it was like that typical, the opposite of this, I think they might have close to a 7-run total. Seriously.
Oh, if the wind was blowing out at 15, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you definitely north of 6.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there will be times this year, like when they play in cores against whoever the Rockies are throwing out, they'll have between a 7 and 8 run total this year.
Do you have DraftKings pick 6 in your state?
We don't. It sucks.
I've heard it could be coming to PA next.
Oh, well, that's good signs for Ohio, probably.
Which is sweet, because I don't really have any pick'em sites. But DraftKings pick 6, you know what I learned about them? I don't know if you knew this, because you don't have it there either. All of the props are static. They don't change throughout the day. I mean, that's significant. All of them are, they don't change. So if you're in a legal betting state. If you've seen this before, you have, and I know you guys are already on DraftKings, obviously, so there's no like promo read here. But if you're not, you get $200 in pick 6 credits if your first ever pick doesn't win. But you look on sports books. I'm trying to get in early in the morning or even the night before, get that closing line value. If you're going into this knowing that they're static, it's not to say that other people don't know that, but I guarantee a lot of people don't know that. I'm making all of my picks very close to lock, adding them up into a lineup, Matt, and I'm just pulling the ones that are far apart from like the sharp sports books. Pinnacle and FanDuel's pretty sharp with NBA props as well. That's the way I'm playing it every time.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it makes too much sense. I had no idea they were static until recently, though. Hopefully they get it in PA. I will actually play there. Anyway, let's do it. Favorite pitcher, favorite contrarian pitcher, favorite stack, favorite tops, favorite contrarian stack. Only 3 games. I think we know the answers to a lot of this, but let's hear it.
The answers for all my stacks are going to be the Yankees. They're my favorite stack. They're my favorite contrarian stack. They're my favorite expensive stack. They're my favorite value stack. They're all of it because the slate is so small that you could, kind of what you said yesterday, you can make them fit into that round hole every time in all those. So it's the Yankees for me offensively. Pitching wise, if you're not stacking the Yankees, I like Kikuchi as a cheap option. If you are, I like Sears, and just, you know what you're getting into bed with when you use a guy like Sears here. I mean, you're playing against the chalk offense.
Yep, you might have syphilis after getting out of that bed.
Or worse.
Or worse. Yeah, I mean, let's hope not. Yeah, Sears, Kikuchi, the 2 contrarian spots, getting less. Sears getting no ownership. I'm with you on the Yankees. Final question. If you're playing, let's say you're playing 20 lineups, do you think you'd have any Kyle Hendricks in there, given the conditions? Yeah.
Yeah, just because, again, if I want to stack the Yankees, I don't think it's like all Sears. I mean, Hendricks is
right. No, yeah, there's no reason any of us want to have 100%
right.
Sears.
I do think he's a better play than Hendricks, though, just because of the ownership Detroit's getting. But I don't think it's like he's such a better play that's the only guy I'd get to there. I do think, though, and this is what happens in MLB DFS, just because of the strikeout upside and the home run upside from the Yankees. Kikuchi is the top cheap guy. You just don't really want to play him with Yankees. That said, this is another slate where, kind of like I talked about with Skubal and the A's, you could definitely play Kikuchi and Aaron Judge or Juan Soto, whatever it is.
Lavender Jones, earthquake hit New York. Is that game still on? I would hope so. It hit me too, but everything seems to be in order. I know North Jersey was the epicenter, but yes, I'm pretty sure that everything is. I don't think this was Taiwan type catastrophic disaster. So yeah, I would assume that game is still playing. Anyway, appreciate you guys as always. Come hang out 5 o'clock. Is it you and Greg? Are you back on with Greg today?
Yeah, if there's no more earthquakes.
Yeah, if his house didn't cave in on him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad it's yours too.
Dude, you know what scares the shit out of me is sinkholes. I see these stories.
Oh my God.
Like this guy in Florida was just sleeping in his bed.
That happened like years ago too. And you'd see that story creep up every couple years.
Do you know where they found his body?
I thought they never found it.
They didn't. Yeah. They never found him. He just disappeared into the earth. Like that is.
Do you know what else is freaky too? Did you hear about I think it was like a little girl who got like the sand hole?
Dude, yes. And another guy too up in the dunes in like a Jersey beach.
Yes.
That happened the month before. My family and I and all of us were going to Virginia Beach. And all I could think of, that would be the most horrifying death. You're just suffocating on sand. And as everyone's digging the sand out, the sand's just filling back in on top of you. Horror story, nightmare fuel. I don't know how anyone hasn't thought about how scary that is.
There was an incident, and then we'll get off, in Cleveland like a couple weeks ago at a hotel in the pool. Somehow, like a little baby. I mean, this is just horrific, and you never wish this on your worst enemy. I can't think of the name or what they're called, but the things that like push out the water in the pool. Somehow
the jets.
Yeah, like the jets like malfunctioned and was sucking things in.
I saw. Yeah.
I mean, it's just horrific.
I can't handle children dying. Children,
it's the worst, especially when you have them now.
Yes, children and dogs.
You feel this horrible sense of pain for the parents of whoever is suffering that. I'm with you.
I mean, I can watch videos of grown humans getting cooked all day long. I'd say in some sense, I'm pretty desensitized to that. Can't see dogs. Can't do it. People are like, what do you mean dogs are dumb? Yeah, they're dumb, but they're innocent. So are children. It all comes down to the innocence factor, I think, Matt. That's what I've come up with over the years. Makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Just because really children and animals can't protect themselves the way human adults can.
Plojo said tsunami deaths are the worst. Dude, I've watched those videos of Japan so many times. It is what was the one the day after Christmas? That was another crazy one, like 2002 or something. Just wiped out a whole island. Not good. Anyway, have a great rest of the day. Be happy. Thanks to Jordan Klein for producing this one, and we'll see you guys back here for the next one. Peace.